Hello everyone, lovely to see you again. Welcome to our last training session on how to hold your breath for longer, dry training for freediving. So, what are we doing today? I thought today could be a really good opportunity for us to, for me to show you an exercise that you can do when you're short in time, essentially. So if you don't have a lot of time to do a proper training session, for those of you who have been with us over the last 2 to 3 weeks, you know that a training session usually goes for about half an hour, 40 minutes, up to an hour, depending on what it is that you're training. Today, we're going to do a very short exercise to build your CO2 tolerance for when you're short in time. Now, please bear in mind that the fact that it's short does not mean that it's easy. It's probably one of the hardest exercises because it involves a lot of contractions. So you trade one thing for the other. So don't be fooled by the fact that it's very short, essentially. And then after we do the training session for today, I'm going to share with you some strategies that you can use to build on your own training plan. One of the things that I mentioned at the last training session is we've talked about some strategies to, like extend your breath hold when you're training. We've talked about strategies in terms of like different exercises that you can do both before your training and during your training. Today I also want to talk about what you do after your training and around your training. And then how do you build a training plan so that you can keep on building on these tools yourself, and how do you combine them to get the best bang for buck. So stick around, hold your breath with me, and then after that we'll do a bit of a recap in terms of how do you keep doing this without me every Sunday. All right, so what we're going to do today in terms of a training session is we're going to be doing 45-second breath holds. Very, very short. Here's a catch. We will only be doing 2 recovery breaths after each breath hold. So what that's going to do is that it's going to start increasing the amount of CO2 in our bloodstream, and of course that's going to trigger a response of like, we need to breathe. And what you want to do with those 2 breath holds, because you only have 2, if you kind of do the then that's not so that's not going to be any good for anyone. So what you really want to do with this exercise is, again, mind over muscle, and try to control those breath holds and get the most out of them. So say we have finished our first 45 seconds. Try to extend them as most as you can so that recovery, like you get all the air in that you can, and you kind of like, make the most of those two breath holds. Now, if you find that it's absolutely impossible for you, you start feeling dizzy, or you start just like, dizzy, you start feeling tingling in your fingers, which are all signs of hypoxia, what you can do is extend the recovery breaths to 3 recovery breaths rather than 2. If you find that it's too easy, you can extend the breath hold from 45 seconds to a minute. And same, like if you find that it's too hard, you can decrease the breath hold to 30 seconds and do 3 recovery breaths, for example. We're going to do 6 reps in total, and that's it. So if you're ready, I'm going to start my timer. Well, first I'm going to loosen up the muscles, and then I'm going to start my timer, and we're going to take it from there. I'm not going to lie down today because it's going to be short and it feels like a lot of work, so I'm just going to be back here and relax. And as we talked about the last time, just relax your muscles. Symbolic entry. Do your mental program. And once we're ready, how did you all go? Please comment in the chat how you went, how you felt, whether you felt easy or hard. Yeah, really interested to know how you went. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's hard to pick something for everybody's level because I don't know where you're all at. So in that sense, if this was a bit too easy, what you can do when you keep practicing this is try holding for a minute with 2 recovery breaths, or try doing just 1 recovery breath rather than 2 recovery breaths. If you felt that it was too hard, try holding for 30 seconds rather than 45 seconds, and try to do 3 recovery breaths rather than 2 recovery breaths in the interim. You can also do this for a bit more reps, so rather than 6, you can try 8 to 10 if you have more time. Again, this is a great exercise for when you're short on time. But it's a great way to kind of like train your CO2 tolerance. And it's another thing to add into your kind of like bag in terms of different exercises. Now, the other thing I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I was going to talk about today is how do you build a training plan for yourself? I'll give you kind of like what works for me, but the first thing you want to do is there's many a freediving training app for free out there. So go into App Store, go into Google Play, and type up freediving training, find one that you like, and download it. Because the beautiful thing about freediving training apps is they've already got inbuilt tables in them. So you just tell it like, my max is this is how much I've managed to do, and it'll build the exercises for you. And then you can just like hit play, and it'll have the little alarm things that I've been doing manually for this purposes, because I'm doing exercises that are not in the training apps. You won't have to worry about it. It'll just like sound and tell you what to do. So great tool, download a freediving training app. Number 2, what you want to do is benchmark. So do the exercise that we did in that first 2 weeks, where we did 2 warm-up breath holds and then a 3rd max attempt for a static. Hold your breath for as long as you can and write that number down, because that's your current max. Essentially what we want to do is push that max to a bigger number, but you need to know what your benchmark is. Once you have a benchmark, thanks to my colleague Scott, who gave me this suggestion for a training plan, which has worked quite well for me. I like to do 3-month training cycles. I find that that's a long enough time for me to build capacity, but not too long that it just feels like, oh, when's the last time I did a max, you know? The first month I focus on building my CO2 tolerance. Now, how do you build your CO2 tolerance? You can do that through things that are called CO2 tables, which again, your freediving training app will have. And they're essentially tables of 8 repetitions where you decrease the recovery time, but keep the breath hold on the same amount. So say you're breath holding for 1 minute and 30, and then you start with a recovery time of 2 minutes, and then the next rep will be 1 minute and 45, then 1 minute and 30, and so on and so forth. This essentially builds the CO2 in your bloodstream. You'll get contractions, and it helps you to train with that. Some people don't like CO2 tables, or have found that they're not really efficient. The other good CO2 training exercise that you can do is the exercise we did last week with a no contractions table. That's really useful if you're really struggling, as I mentioned, to like get comfortable with the contractions, and that's what's keeping you from extending your max. Then no contractions tables will help you delay those contractions and therefore increase your max. This exercise today, again, if you're short on time, another great exercise to improve CO2 tolerance, because it gets you very familiar with contractions. So do that for a month, 2 to 3 times a week. The second month you want to focus on technique. It's going to be a very diverse month because you're going to start focusing on technique, and you want to start focusing on both O2 training and CO2 training. So if you're training once a week, maybe one day you do CO2 training. Then technique, when you're doing dry training, is a bit tricky because like if you're in the pool, that's where you would do, you know, like dynamic no fins, for example, or kind of like practice your turns, or do like anything that kind of like improves your swimming technique. But if you're doing dry training, what you can do is cross-training with, as I mentioned, yoga, for example, where you want to really work on your flexibility to improve your lung capacity. So do some stretches. Essentially, stretches is what you want to be doing to improve technique when you're doing dry training. And anything that kind of increases the flexibility of your diaphragm. And then the O2 training, there's again O2 tables, which is a reverse of CO2 tables. Essentially with that one, you're going to be having set recovery times. So say a minute and 20, and then you're going to be increasing your breath hold. So maybe you start with a minute and 30 breath hold, and then you go a minute and 45, 2 minutes, and so forth. Now, when you're doing CO2 training, you want to be training to 50% of your max capacity. So say if your maximum breath hold is 2 minutes, you want to be training with 1 minute breath holds. When you're training for O2 training, you want to be doing around 70 to 80% of your max capacity. So again, if your maximum breath hold is 2 minutes, then you would be training for around 1.5 minutes, 1 minute and 40 breath holds. And then essentially after you've done the 3 months, you benchmark again and see your progress, which is a very exciting day because to this day, following this training plan, I have not had a time when my max didn't improve. So it's quite rewarding to see that what 3 months ago felt really hard is now easy. Something very important, you don't want to be benchmarking, like, I know we did 2 back-to-back max attempts in the first 2 weeks. You don't want to be doing that every single time. You don't want to be pushing yourself to your max limit because you're going to overextend yourself. So space the max outs and train first month to 50, and then second month kind of start salt and peppering with the O2, last month to 70 or 80%. That's pretty much it. So again, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you enjoyed this series. Thank you for holding your breath with me. And if you liked this series, let me know. I'm keen to do something like this again in the future. Let me know if there's anything in particular that you'd like to know that we can cover. And see you soon. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.